Juicing may harm your health in just 3 days. That's what we're going to talk about today. And welcome back to the RMD podcast with me, your host, Dr. Debra Durst, and my co-host.
Hey guys, Faraday Goli, family nurse practitioner here at Revitalize MD.
All right. Well, this one will be an interesting one because juice cleanses are always trending on social media.
Yeah,
always.
They seem to kind of like ebb and flow.
Yes.
They're the in thing, or they're out.
Yeah.
And they've been talked about a little bit more.
And I've heard about these for years. I didn't actually do it. I was just getting a bunch of juices. And so it was like called a cleanse. I had to sign a release for that. And that was like 7 years ago.
That's crazy. Yeah. I just went on and ordered, I think it was like a discount group me. I'm like, oh, I'll just order a bunch of these fresh pressed juices. And I just added them into my diet. I didn't do the whole juice only cleanse, but
I didn't do it either. But when they asked me to sign a medical release for it,
That's
I'm like,
interesting.
I just looked at them. I'm like, I wouldn't have to do the same thing at McDonald's. Like, so it didn't make sense to me. But anyhow, but they've
what
been
kind
around.
of cleanse are you getting into, Deb?
Well, exactly. I mean, well, if you don't have to sign a consent to do fast food on a regular basis, which could kill you, I wouldn't think juices, are going to kill you, if anything. So let's dive into it because there's been a study that kind of looked at juicing. Yeah. So that's kind of the basis for why we brought it up today. And we're going to talk about it because we're always going to bring you some science related to a topic that might be trending. And so if you're thinking about resetting your gut or resetting your system,
right?
And
it's a detox.
Detox. We would love to, let's start a conversation in the comments and just let us know the main reasons why you've done a juice cleanse if you had.
And did it work? I'm really curious on that.
Yes. And what measures were you looking at when you say it did work? And
did you sustain those measures?
Yes. All good questions for sure. But if you're thinking about doing a juice reset, you may want to think again. And we're going to dive into this study a little bit because it also makes sense from a standpoint of what juices might have in them. So we'll assume that this juice cleanse is not going to be some processed juice that sits on a shelf. We're talking about fresh, cold pressed juices or just fresh
whole foods.
Juices. Yes, whole foods completely. And so is that healthy? And so again, this study was very interesting. It was juice only. And
they actually looked at 3 different participant groups: a juice only group, a whole foods only group, and a juice and food group.
Okay. All right.
And they kind of broke it down to look at, well, what does juicing actually do to the gut health, to bacteria, to the microbiome? And it was kind of surprising, but then when you think about the science behind it, it's like, yeah, that makes sense. Of course, that's what happened. So the way that they measured their data was they took saliva tests, they took cheek swabs, they looked at stool samples, and then they looked at, nope, those were the 3. Sorry, those 3.
Saliva, the stool samples.
Yep, and then a cheek swab.
Yeah.
So looking at the cellular health as well. And what they found was that the juice-only diet actually decreased good bacteria and increased bad bacteria that was linked to increased inflammation cytokines.
Yes. And then where that gut, like leaky gut syndrome.
Where leaky gut comes from.
And
absolutely.
And it was only 3 days. So it was a 3-day, and it was the juice only arm that pretty much showed the negative effects.
Yeah, it did. It showed linked with inflammation, gut permeability, so the leaky gut. The whole foods by itself had the best bacterial microbiome kind of outcomes. And then the juice with whole foods was a little bit better than the juice only, but not great by itself. So really what it came down to is a whole food diet was your best bet for a healthy microbiome.
And so we're talking about like shifts in your normal. So there's a huge amount of bacteria in your gut that actually make up a significant part of our DNA and our health, because that bacteria maintains, when healthy, will maintain a healthy inflammation level or a suppression of an inflammation level. So it's anti-inflammatory to have good bacteria. And if you think about it, there's just one lining of the GI tract that keeps us essentially from the external world, because we take in foods. We have the skin that keeps us from that. And then we have a GI tract. We take in foods, we take in whatever comes along with that, whether it's toxins, pesticides. And then it goes down the GI system, and you have one layer of cells that keep us from the external. And the more they sit in the gut, obviously, the bigger the problem, because they're not supposed to. So it can cause inflammation in the wall, which is what we're talking about. That bacteria lives in the external world, just like on the skin, to protect us. And so if they're not there to protect us in the right ways, then things get in, and then they cause inflammation, and then ultimately cause autoimmune and diseases that happen. So that GI effect in that one cell needs the protection of bacteria to keep us healthy.
Exactly. So juicing probably is not the best option for that. And what they found on top of that is that with the juicing only, the process of juicing tends to pull all the fiber out of the vegetables in the fruit that you're juicing. And it's that lack of fiber that then is the correlation to declining of that good bacteria and increasing sugar-loving bacteria, which is what causes the inflammation.
Yeah. So, that's very interesting, because again, you need fiber for a healthy gut, and juicing actually shifts the bacteria in a bad way. And then it also pulls out fiber. So both of those things are bad. And then it was pro-inflammatory.
Yep.
Overall.
Yeah, it also showed that reduced fiber intake also impacted metabolism, immunity, and then mental health even, which I thought was really interesting, because we don't really talk about fiber in that capacity typically.
Yeah, no. Well, I think from a metabolism, probably just because it's GI, it's moving it through, it's keeping it healthy. And and I guess
immunity, because of the poor, lower good bacteria.
Yeah. And then if you have inflammation in your gut or leaky gut, then you just are not going to have good immune function either. Yeah. But mental health is interesting, and I wonder how they measured that. I didn't look into depth, but I'm again guessing that it was only a 3-day juice, and so probably how they felt on it potentially too. And so
they talked about the crash, the dizziness, the mood swings. But if you're eating a ton of sugar, that does make sense.
Which ultimately is what this is, right? And so like juices do have carbohydrates in them. Obviously, if it's not a whole foods juice in whole foods, then you're obviously talking about having increased fructose in your, and potentially other, even other things that would actually be sugared, and just causing an increased issue with gut, not only the gut, but also in the bacteria, obviously, but feeding cancers and
I was going to say,
blood
huge
sugar
for
regulation. Yes, weight
that has
gain.
been huge in the news lately. That's been a hot topic. That cancer thrives on sugar, and we really should be eliminating.
Yes, and I think it's interesting just from that standpoint. That's a whole podcast in and of itself.
Yeah, it's a good idea for
another one. But that post-surgery for cancers and taking out a tumor or something, that the next thing that you see on a food tray is Jell-O, or something with sugar in it right after surgery, and right after cancer surgeries too, puddings, Jell-Os, those soft foods that you are now allowed to advance, and juices and all that. So
I think we have another podcast that we can talk about. So we'll digress and get back to the microbiome. Yes. So not only did it affect bacteria in the gut, it was interesting that it showed that it affected bacteria in the oral cavity as well. So the mouth was actually more affected more quickly than the gut.
Yeah. And again, you're talking about periodontal and dental issues that can happen as you get older too, but also even just the tartar, the buildup. And so the more buildup you have, probably the more likely you should think about the fact that you aren't doing something right with your GI tract, because it definitely does affect it. But I think that, so juice alone, even if these were all again, fruits and vegetables. Juices alone had the biggest shifts in the bacteria in the
Yep.
gut and the
And the mouth.
inflammatory marker in the mouth. And then juice with whole foods, you had some shift, but it was better.
Mm-hmm.
And then what's interesting is the plant-based, foods.
Yep.
Those had the most favorable microbiome outcomes. And again, I think that there's a book, How Not to Die, that talks about like a whole food. I heard him speak at A4M way back and scanned the book. And it's really just saying that you should have plant-based foods. And those are the most effective for decreasing cancers and decreasing and even regressing chronic diseases. But if
I
that's
think
not
those
the
are
main,
healthy, but I do think it's really important to get lean proteins for
I,
muscle building and mental health and just kind
yeah,
of across the board. But there is a lot on
yeah.
plant-based foods and the benefits of reducing inflammation. But I think you can kind of twofold that. You can do both.
Well, I don't think there's one diet for any one person or even supplements for them at the same time. But it is interesting because there is some good studies to show the anti-cancer and the regression of chronic diseases with just plant-based foods. I'm not of that mindset, but there is some study support of that. And he even talked about the fact that way back we used to say moderate smoking was okay. And then it was moderate meat consumption was okay. And it was a quite impressive talk. And he does have a book. I think that it's worth a podcast at some point just because I don't think a lot of people are of that mindset. And maybe it's just the healthier proteins that we talk about during that.
Yeah.
Because I think you just need to have healthy proteins because the Mediterranean diet has healthy
That's
proteins
it.
or
Yeah.
the
The lean
plant-based,
proteins, good sourcing, organic.
plant-fed, beef, all that kind of stuff. So I think it's a topic worth discussing
Something
in
we
the
can
future
dive
just
into.
because even if we said this is healthy, a lot of people aren't going to do that. And I'm of the mindset that as we get older, we definitely need to have more protein in our diet.
Absolutely.
And you just can't get that amount of protein with just plant-based.
So if that's
So,
something you guys are interested in hearing about, leave us a comment down below. We always want your feedback. We can come up with ideas and get off on tangents, but we want to know if it's what you want to hear as well.
Yeah. And they're all somewhat related when we're talking about
Yeah.
this because one does go into the other. And there's so many different mindsets out there. But I think that at the end of this, there are a couple other points. And then I think there is a takeaway for me because I think there's enough information there that we have natural detox. So if you're doing it for a detox, concept, then we have detox ability. We have the kidney, we have the liver that are awesome at detoxing things. And so does the juice really detox the things that they don't? And that's the bigger question. And so I think from a just common sense standpoint, if we're talking about endocrine disruptors in plastics or toxic chemicals that we have or pesticides, do we think a juice is detoxing those? Like a plant-based vegetable juice is detoxing those more than our liver or kidneys? And we know our liver and kidneys aren't able to do that. So is it juice?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I would say no. So I think that is definitely a myth. Or if you're of that mindset, I don't think that there's anything that would really support that, including common sense. But I think that
I know, I love it.
So yeah,
Facts.
I mean,
Facts.
just facts that I think that that's a myth. But I think that juicing can have worse effects on older individuals and definitely men over 50. And it found that maybe they have the worst and negative effects as far as inflammation and gut health. And so that's something to think about. And then I think, that again, there's not a lot of studies out on it. I don't think that it's going to be harmful, but I think the takeaway.
I think long term it possibly could because of the inflammatory markers. Now, the study did show that everything kind of went back to normal with enough time. But if you're doing long term juicing, that definitely could have some long-term effects on it. So we're talking about a 3-day.
Yeah.
A 3-day juice isn't going to have any
Yeah.
long-term effects.
I would agree with you. I think if you stay almost in the perimeter of the store, so it's all the healthy whole foods, like nothing processed. But I think that, yes, in a short term, I don't think it's going to be harmful. I think anything along those lines, like you're in the perimeter of the store, you're eating vegetables and fruits, now you're juicing them, and that's all you do for 3 days. Yeah, in short term, yes, definitely not harmful in short term, but long term, yes. And I think that the issue is it doing what you think it's doing? That I think is the issue. And I don't think that there's any evidence to support that
Yep.
you should
The
juice.
other would be weight loss,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if you're doing it for weight loss, are you going to see weight loss if all you're doing is drinking juice? Probably.
Mm-hmm.
It's calories in, it's calories out, it's what you're taking in. But then what happens when you come off the juice fast?
Yeah.
The weight comes right back on. How much of that is just water shifting?
Yes. And I think, again, as we hit hormonal changes with perimenopause, menopause, or even andropause, that I think that increased protein is important. And the more that you build muscle, the better longevity, and probably the more you'll metabolize and therefore decrease fat. So I think ultimately the weight loss is something that you want to find something you can do that can be sustained for weight
Mhm.
loss and in a healthy way. And that's not a 3 day, like weight loss in 3 days, just like it's
It's
not
not real.
harmful. It's probably not helpful to have weight loss in 3 days. It means nothing. And I think
And
you're
it's not
right.
real.
I think you're
It's
right.
fake
It slowly
loss.
changes. Yeah. Yeah. So anyhow, I think that it doesn't support, so it does not support juicing for a detox. It doesn't support juicing for overall effects because of the inflammation, the gut microbiome, metabolic
Mhm.
effects, all that. And so I think that short term, fine. Long term, no point.
Yeah.
Is that your?
Yeah. Takeaway is, I mean, I think we just need to stay hydrated, eat fruits and vegetables, eat lean protein, eat around a diet, get some exercise. I think if we want to stress the body for whatever reason for a metabolic jump, there's other ways you can do it other than drinking juice and potentially causing some microbiome issues.
All right. Well, sounds perfect. So that's what we have. And let us know if you have tried it because we want to hear what you found. And definitely if there were some added, energy, brain boost, anything we haven't talked about. And let us know if there's anything else you want to talk about because we're willing to deep dive into anything wellness or sexual wellness.